Mr. Crosby here, and I'm going to be taking you through another thrilling GCSE style question. Okay, I've chosen June 2012 paper, and we're going to be looking at question 3 on the interwars period. And a quick glance at the questions will tell me that this question 3, is all about the path to war, Hitler's path to war. Okay, we'll start with question A, our 4-marker. Okay, dead simple. Describe what happened in the Saar in 1935 as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so this is 4-marker, and you're going to get a mark per point you make. Okay, just describe. You just have to state things that happened. Okay, so the only bit of advice that the mark scheme says, events must relate to 1935, but as you all know, that is when the plebiscite occurred. So you should have been identifying things like there was the plebiscite. It decided the region should return to German rule in the end, although the decision was whether that should happen or whether it should go to France or remain in the League of Nations. It was promised under the Treaty of Versailles. It doesn't say this in the mark scheme. 90% vote. Propaganda success for Hitler, and it was the first expansion. Okay, these are just examples, so I could state anything I know about this. So I could be identifying that the propaganda campaign came from Goebbels, or that the support of the Catholic Church played a part in this. Okay. You do often get additional mark for supporting detail, is usually restricted to 1 point. So if I've expanded on a point, I can get an additional mark. So here we've got the League held a plebiscite and what the plebiscite was going to do. Okay, if I talked more about that, I'd be restricted to 2 marks. I've got to make some other different points to be getting more than that. Final quick note. 1 word answers that could be vague or show that you don't quite understand the topic won't be included. So I couldn't write just a plebiscite. I'd have to say the League of Nations held a plebiscite or something like that. Okay, I couldn't just say propaganda. I've got to say that there was Hitler's propaganda machine played a part in this or something like that. Now, moving on to question B, okay, I've got my explain type question, okay, 6 marks, very standard. Most of you should by now be realising what you need to do for these sorts of questions, okay. Level 2 to 3 marks here, just for identifying or describing reasons. Explain why Italy and Japan were an increasing threat to world peace in the 1930s. Okay, these are all legitimate reasons. Okay, was the most important power in Asia. There was tension between military and the politicians. This is Abyssinia now. Mussolini followed an aggressive foreign policy. Okay, now the reason these are only in the level in 2 to 3 marks, level 2. Is you are not actually explaining just by stating these, okay? And the rule of thumb is, can I still ask the question why about them? Am I still wondering why there's an increasing threat to world peace? Or does this fully explain, okay? And these are just the reasons, but there's no explanation behind it, and I would be wanting to ask the question, well, why did that increase the threat of world peace? Which brings us on to level 3, which is going to get me 4 or 5 marks explaining 1 reason. Okay, usually you're going to get the 5 marks if it's developed. Okay, that's meaning that you explain it very well and there is precise evidence to back up your point. Okay, so here we've got an example. Italy was hit badly by the Great Depression. Okay, this would come into my bracket of just identifying or describing the reason. Okay, but the difference here is, firstly, we've got some precise evidence. Okay, Unemployment rose. Mussolini turned to foreign adventures to distract Italian people from their troubles at home. Okay, Mussolini is the driving force behind the Abyssinian episode. Okay, despite warnings. Okay, that was from the League of Nations, predominantly Britain and France. They're invading Abyssinia anyway. Okay, and then finally, the thing that actually really explains why there's a threat is Britain and France do not want to provoke Mussolini, as they fear he would move towards, because they feared he would move towards Hitler, thus creating a threat to world peace. Okay, and notice that final phrase, thus creating a threat to world peace, links back to the question, threat to world peace in the 1930s. So I've actually addressed the question, and I'm no longer asking the question, why did this increase threat to world peace? Okay, and then explain 2 reasons here. If I do this twice, I'm going to get 6 marks. Okay, so you're going to have to do double the amount of work just to move from 5 to 6 marks. Okay, but it's all about increasing wherever you can those little marks that you need to pick up for the best grade you can get. Okay, in this case, you're really spoilt for choice because you explain why Italy and Japan were an increasing threat. You could just do 1 for each if you want. Notice that this reason here only deals with Italy. Okay, so my other reason could just pick 1 for Japan. Okay, so I don't need to be, for this question in particular, I don't need to be racking my brains for various reasons. There should at least be 1 for each that you can come up with. Okay, there we go. So really, to sum this one up, I'm looking for 2 reasons explained. Okay, make sure that you've got a good explanation in there, and that you've got precise evidence and you're addressing that why aspect of the question. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is pause the video. If you're working in pairs, maybe compare answers to this one, or if you're working on your own, just go through yours and just see if you've actually done all these things. Have you firstly, did you actually know what the reasons were? Okay, were you able to explain? Were you using some precise detail? And were you actually linking back to that question? Make sure you've actually addressed the why aspect. Okay, did you get your 2 reasons? Okay, if not, maybe come up with some targets. If you're working in a pair and one of you nailed this one and the other one has maybe struggled, maybe that one could show them where they've gained the marks that the other one lost. Okay, and try and come up with some advice for one another to take into the next time you do this style question. Right, moving on to question C. Okay, this is our 10 marker, and you should be aware by now that you must choose between either question 2 or question 3 on this paper, and my advice is to decide based on this 10 marker question which of the 2 is the easiest to answer. Okay, because that is where the majority of the marks you're going to pick up are going to come from, so you want to make sure that you get this one right. Okay, and we can tell what we need to do just from the way that the question is phrased. Okay, we've got a how far statement and we've got to explain our answer. Okay, the outbreak of war in 1939 was all Hitler's fault. Often you'll be given a statement and then it says how far do you agree with this statement. Okay, and that implies that we're going to need to be looking at both sides of the story here, and trying to think about some other possible reasons for the outbreak of war in 1939, other than just Hitler himself. Okay, and each time we come up with a reason, it's got to be explained properly. So again, our level 2 to 3 marks here, exactly the same as if we were answering an explain question. We're just identifying or describing reasons. Okay. You can see here that we've got a variety of reasons for the outbreak of war in 1939. Some of them, like our top one, he signed the Nazi-Soviet pact, which gave him security, relates to Hitler himself. Some of them are relating to other reasons as well. Okay, so British policy of appeasement did not work, League of Nations failed, USA not involved, Treaty of Versailles had left Germany resenting their situation. Okay, but like in our previous question B, we can see that we are not explaining here, we're simply describing. Okay, we're still wanting to know why these contributed to the outbreak of war in 1939, the start of World War II. Okay, level 3 then, 4 to 6 marks. That's where we're going to actually start doing things properly and explaining the causes for the outbreak of 1939. But we've got either or here. We've got Hitler's fault or other reasons. Okay, so Hitler signed the Nazi-Soviet Pact, which gave him security. That's the same as this top one here. But you can see that the rest of this paragraph adds explanation. This gave him confidence to attack Poland without fearing war on 2 fronts. Obviously not going to have to fight Russia because he's got a pact with them. He did not believe Britain and France would keep their promise to defend Poland because they had not responded over his invasion of Czechoslovakia. Therefore, he invaded Poland. But Britain and France did declare war. That final statement there shows that the initial reason explains why the outbreak of war occurred. Okay, so I've linked it back to the question, and notice how precise the answer is. Okay, we've got reference to Czechoslovakia, we've got reference to the other countries, Britain and France. We've got the idea of 2 fronts here, and obviously the declaration of war. So I'm very precise. I know my stuff if I've written this answer, but I've also not just described events, but I've explained why Hitler thought he'd get away with it, but he didn't, and therefore war broke out. Okay. If we look at the other possibility, this one addresses a reason that doesn't relate to the statement. Okay, another reason for the outbreak of war in 1939. The policy of appeasement encouraged Hitler to believe he could keep getting away with aggression, expansion. Although we've got the word Hitler there, the reason is actually relating to appeasement, not him. Okay, and we could say the same thing about this answer here. Okay, it expands on it. Britain and France hoped Hitler would be satisfied with the Sudetenland, relating to the Munich Agreement. Precise evidence there. Okay, therefore, good word to introduce the final part of your paragraph. He invades Poland, and so we are linking back to the question again. So the first thing I'm going to need to be including in this question then are developed reasons. I'll put in brackets for outbreak. Obviously that's relating to this specific question, but more generally a 10 marker is going to need developed reasons for the statement. Okay, so there we go. Now if I want to be getting into the money end of things and be looking at a level 4, getting 7 to 9 marks here, okay, I'm going to be needing both sides of the argument. So rather than having either or of these paragraphs, I'm going to need both sides. Okay, so this requires me to know a number of reasons for different aspects of the interwars period. Okay, so we need to argue for and against. Okay, so that's our next target. Have we argued for and against? Are our developed reasons for both sides of the argument? Okay, and if you notice here, the mark scheme does say maximum of 8 marks for answers lacking balance. Okay, so if I'm going to be looking at 9 and 10 marks, I'm going to need to have given sufficient amount of time in the exam to both sides of this argument. Okay, I'm not going to argue massively in favour of Hitler and not talk about any other reasons, and I'm not going to be talking about any massively in favour of other reasons and not talk about Hitler very much. Okay, it's not a token gesture. I really do need to give sufficient time to both sides of the argument. Okay, and that doesn't matter if you agree with it or not. Okay, what you are showing the examiner is that you're aware of the different of the different historical perspectives here. And then finally, for my level 5 10 marks, that elusive 10, okay, I'm going to need an overall justified conclusion. Okay, so that's the last thing I'm going to include. Overall justified conclusion. Okay, and that is where I state what I think the main reason for the outbreak of war would be. What is the biggest reason? Okay, now the reason I just mentioned the word justified here is the how far evaluation basically means I've got to come down on one side of the argument at the end. Having made a balanced argument, I then state which I think is the most legit reason. Okay, and justified here, I'm talking about the fact that I need to convince the examiner I've actually evaluated. Okay, and this is a bit of a tricky one because some examiners are more generous than others at this, but I don't think you should take the chance. I think you should make sure that you are stating more than just what you've previously stated. Okay, don't tell me that it was Hitler's fault, that the main reason was Hitler's fault, but then just state the reason why as the same as one of these earlier paragraphs. Okay, I'm not actually stating why it outweighs another one. So what I need to be doing is looking at why that reason outweighs the other. So for example, I might be looking at the policy of appeasement and saying that that was the main reason, and then if I want to justify that, rather than just stating why appeasement led to war, I could be saying something like appeasement was the most important because this was the catalyst that allowed Hitler to get away with it, and Hitler's own actions would not have been possible without appeasement. Okay, so I could be saying, well, this was the root cause of the outbreak, or something along those lines. I could be saying the same thing for the treaty. Okay, if the treaty hadn't generated the mess in the first place, none of this would have been necessary. Okay, so I've got to be adding a reason for this being the most important. Okay, right, so what I want you to do now is I want you to the video is coming to an end, so once it's over, what you're going to do is, again, if you're working in pairs, swap work, maybe compare your answers, see where you've dropped your marks. Okay, see if you can understand the mark that I've given you, and then come up with some targets in pairs that are going to stand you in good stead for the next time you do this 10-mark style question. And I want to see you implementing those targets next time you do a 10-mark question. Okay, thanks for listening.